It's really easy to remember Alison as a disturbed woman, but she was a whole lot more than that. Violin playing, academically gifted, and friends loved her. Her friends loved her. You can't help thinking that perhaps if she'd been given the help that she needed, she could have had a fantastic life.
But Alison Bell died when she was 25. Her family believes it was suicide. Her brother Tom has spent almost 20 years investigating her death and her care at the hands of the NHS in the years before. In the late 80s, Alison was a patient at the old Garland Psychiatric Hospital in Carlisle. She'd been diagnosed with schizophrenia. Her family says she was vulnerable. This medical record shows that in 1988, Alison fell pregnant and had an abortion. At that time, she was an outpatient at the Garlands and having a sexual relationship with a trainee nurse.
We thought, well, that's completely wrong. It's utterly inappropriate. We suspected it was unlawful, but we didn't know at the time. And it was at that point that we then approached the NHS in North Cumbria to find out what had happened.
Under the Mental Health Act, it was illegal for a nurse to have a sexual relationship with an outpatient on hospital premises. Alison died in 1991, 3 years after she'd left the Garlands and moved to Yorkshire. An inquest into her death recorded an open verdict. In 2002, Tom received an unreserved apology for the trainee nurse's behaviour from the North Cumbria Mental Health and Learning Disabilities Trust. It superseded the North Lakeland Healthcare Trust. Tom also asked Cumbria Police to investigate the relationship. They did, but in 2002, the Crown Prosecution Service dropped the case due to lack of evidence. The force has recently admitted that officers didn't pursue all lines of inquiry, resulting in a flawed investigation. Their letter continued, "Cumbria Constabulary could have and should have done more, and we let your family down."
I thought I was living somebody else's life. I thought this is the kind of stuff that only happens to other people. Surely this hasn't, it was kind of like this kind of happened.
The Garlands has been replaced by the Carlton Clinic and is now run under different management. In 2015, Tom decided there were still too many unanswered questions. He put pressure on the police to reinvestigate his sister's case. They did. But last month, the Crown Prosecution Service said it was dropping the case. The CPS said it wasn't in the public interest because the offences here dated back to 1988. The suspect has no previous convictions, had been dismissed from his job in 2001, and any punishment was likely to be nominal. In documents seen by ITV Border, the senior Crown prosecutor also said, "The suspect has admitted a sexual relationship with Alison after she became an outpatient. He denies that he knew it was illegal to do so." It continues, "There is some evidence to suggest that a number of people knew Alison was residing with the suspect at his residence within hospital grounds." Tom says in light of that admission, the decision not to prosecute is indefensible.
They're kind of making Cumbria look like a backwater. I mean, the message that it sends out, I think, is that the mentally ill and the vulnerable, justice for them isn't important. That's not the right message to send out in 2017. They have somebody on record telling them what they did, and the CPS are saying it doesn't meet the public interest test. I don't know who they think the public is, and I don't know what they think the public interest is, because to me it clearly meets the public interest test.
The CPS has told ITV Border it gave Alison's case serious consideration, adding, "A specialist CPS lawyer reviewed all the evidence in accordance with the Code for Crown Prosecutors. We concluded that while the evidential test set out in the code was met, a prosecution would not be in the public interest." The Garlands has a troubled history. In 2000, a report into unrelated allegations of physical abuse found that some patients in the mid to late 90s had been subjected to cruel and degrading care. Tom fears there are unturned stones from the 80s and the authorities should investigate.
If someone has openly said that they have committed an offence, and the CPS in their letter have said that it's likely that other people at the Garlands knew what was going on. They should be doing everything they can to lift the lid on that and uncover anything they can.
Cumbria Police told ITV Border they are not aware of any other complaints, and no information has been found within the police investigation to suggest relationships between staff and patients were more widespread. In response to Tom's criticism of the police, a spokesperson added, the constabulary has recently conducted a further thorough investigation into this matter. Charging advice was sought independently from the Crown Prosecution Service, who have concluded that no further action will be taken. The Cumbria Partnership NHS Foundation Trust told us that since 2000, mental health services in Cumbria have been the responsibility of a number of organisations which no longer exist, but that it has been cooperating fully with the police and their inquiries into this case. Tom says he'll continue to campaign.
She'll always be missed. You don't sorry. There's never a day. There isn't a day where you don't, just for even for a second, think about them. Sorry.
More than a quarter of a century after her death, Alison's family say they're still searching for justice. Katie Hunter, ITV News.